Hello friends, welcome to Vision Study. Today we are going to start a new topic on Indian history. We would study about class 6th NCERT. So the book is about our past. As you know, there are going to be 12 chapters in this book and we would discuss a small intro of what these chapters are going to be about. The first chapter is what, where, how and when. In this chapter we would discuss like what history are we going to study, from where, like the sites, how, what were the sources from which we would study, and when talks about the time period about what we are going to study. Next is the second chapter, on the trail of earliest people. In this chapter we would look forward of how people lived, how they were hunters and gatherers, what tools did they use, okay, where are those places, where did they spend their time, the habitation cum factory sites, the important sites of Paleolith, Neolith and Megalith. This map is very important with the exam's perspective, and few important sites and paintings. Those were there. Alright. Going forward to the third chapter. The name of the third chapter is From Gathering to Growing Food. As our forefathers were hunters and gatherers, so they had to gather food. But what made them go from gathering to growing food? What changes happened in the climate? What circumstances were made that they had to go through these changes and domesticate and live a settled life? How did they store food, the grains? How did they domesticate animals? Which were the animals to be first domesticated, and their tools and their way of living, the burial practices, the houses, we would discuss in this chapter. The fourth chapter is in the earliest cities. Now, as the name talks, we would discuss about the earliest cities of the civilization of Indus Valley, the Harappan civilization, few important sites. What did we find from these sites? Who were the people who excavated these sites? What pottery is it there in these sites? Okay. And you would even see the planning of these cities, the craft of the city. Next chapter is what books and burials tell us. We are going to study in this chapter the books, the Rig Veda, Samved, Yajurved, Atharved, the whole of Vedic period, the life of people in Vedic period, the condition of women in Vedic period, important things in Vedic period, the taxation practices, okay, and rest would be like the practices what everyone did in their daily life. How did they spend their life? What things did they do? How were the social differences? Okay. Next chapter is kingdom, kings and an early republic. So as you know, kingdoms, kings, a king has to rule a kingdom. But what made our forefathers to go from a settled life to form a Ganasangha, from Ganasangha to form Janapada, Mahajanapada, and then to become a kingdom and eventually an empire building? So what were these changes? How the use of iron helped us to bring an empire? What agricultural changes? What trade practices? What taxes were the system, administration system using? Who were the important officers in these periods? All right. Seventh chapter is new questions and ideas. So the name of the chapter itself is fascinating. So we are going to question a lot of things. So how do you question? As you know, the Bhakti movement started with a question. They questioned Brahmanism practices, the sacrifices, the rituals. So we will study about that. We would study about Buddhism and Jainism, their origin. We would study about the Upanishads, and then few important stories which are given in the book. Then we would study about monasteries. The first monastery, who excavated it, the earliest one, why did we need to excavate it, and why did eventually, including Jainism, Buddhism and the monastery system, degrade. Even Buddha had said that it would degrade, but what and why did it degrade? We would study that. Eighth chapter is Ashoka, the emperor who gave up war. The significant individual who is the most remarkable and the remembered person in the Indian history, Ashoka. What changes did he bring in the lives of each and individual? how Bhari-Ghosha to Dhamma-Ghosha has eventually changed the life of Ashoka and the people, the administration, the taxation system, why still he was not so pacific. He used to, go for wars, but not so extreme as Bhari-Ghosha. So we would study about the important constructions also. Alright, next we would look forward for the Silk Route. Silk Route, which is still relevant today, the pet project of Xi Jinping, and why is it in news and why is it connected from since the ancient times with the Indian history. Alright, the ninth chapter is Vital Villages and Thriving Towns. Why villages were basic unit of administration, how did the towns flourish? Okay, now if you see in this chapter, we will study about the sculptures, the stories, the Sangam age, how did the city trade, what were the important places in these towns, and the craft of the people. Okay, the 10th chapter is Traders, Kings and Pilgrims. Pilgrims are the people who come with a religious motive to, either they go to another country or another place. What was a kind of pottery? In this chapter, we would even study about the southern Indian kingdoms like Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. We would read in detail about Buddhism and Jainism and Silk Route and other practices. We would study a little about the architecture of Buddhism, how Mathura architecture is different from the northwestern Takshila architecture, how Bhakti movement began, alright? Next chapter, that is the 11th chapter, talks about new empires and kingdoms. So what are empires? A larger kingdom. So how do we have so many of aspiring kings who wanted to build an empire in our country, who wanted to almost rule the whole of subcontinent, and how many a times their aspirations failed, and who had put a stop on such aspirations. So we would read about that. We would read about few important genealogies, those are Prashasthis, and the kingdoms of the south, even that, like Pallavas and Chalukyas during the time of Harsha. Going forward, we would study about their army system, the Samantas and the Sangam age, and why it is important. See, Sangam age is important for all the exams perspective. Sangam, religion and Bhakti movement. These three topics are like hot topics for all the government examinations. So you must know everything about it. The 12th chapter, Buildings, Paintings and Books. As the name says, we are going to study about the architecture, the books and certain paintings. So if you will see in the chapter that we would be reading about monolithic temple, the stupas, the architecture, how Shrenis, the association of merchants, how they helped build stupa, get more beautiful, get more magnificent. What were the paintings in Ajanta? Why these paintings are important? Because they directly come in examination. Next, we would read about books. Which books were important? Including the Sangam age books like Shilapadikaram, and Manimekalai. How is it important? Who has written it? Why do we study about it? In whose dynasty were Sangams called? Rest are the questions that we would solve in the last chapter. Now, what I want to request you is that when we are done with the chapter, you need to read at least once NCERT, so that if you have any doubts regarding the chapters, you can either ask those doubts or just read the NCERT. You won't have doubts then. You have to read the maps, the images. We have tried to include almost all the images given in the NCERT because questions directly come from the images. And if certain images are left out, you can read it from the book. So that is how we are going to study the class 6 NCERT of Indian history. Okay, thank you.